Right. Kashish, we may start now.
So, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Kashish Verma, a volunteer at C Cube, and also I'm a first year law student. So, before we dive into the event, allow me to briefly introduce the three dynamic organizations hosting this event. First one, the Climate Cadets Collective, also known as C Cube, is a youth driven initiative that began at Lady Shriram College as part of the Millennium Fellowship, a UN academic impact project. With leaders from institutions like Columbia University, Delhi University, South Asian University, etc., we are committed to empowering vulnerable communities. Our focus is on creating resilient, grassroots level networks, particularly among slum dwellers, through hands on bottom up climate action. Second, Pioneers Youth. It emerged allowing the success of the Pioneers Expo 2018, and it has since grown into a robust South Asian network aimed at fostering cross border youth dialogue. Focused on sustainability and development, this platform unites young leaders from 6 different countries to engage in meaningful discussions on the pressing issues facing South Asia. By facilitating conversations and collaborative projects, Pioneers Youth not only raises awareness but also champions innovative solutions at both national and regional levels, building a more sustainable future for the region. Third is IIT Madras Diplomacia. IITM Diplomacia is the premier public speaking society of IIT Madras, where students cultivate skills in diplomacy, debate, and persuasive communication, and it is known for producing some of the sharpest minds in the public discourse. The collaboration of these three dynamic organizations bring together passionate individuals and organizations united by a shared vision of creating lasting impact and driving meaningful change for a better future. Coming to today's agenda, today we gather here to discuss one of the most pressing challenges of our time, climate resilience and economic sustainability. As the impacts of climate change becomes increasingly evident, it is imperative that we explore legislative approaches that not only protect our environment but also ensure long-term economic viability. Our agenda will delve into insightful discussions on policy frameworks, innovative solutions, and real world case studies. Together, we will examine how governments and industries can work hand in hand to create resilient communities while driving sustainable growth for future generations.
Bhavani.
What you do makes a difference, and what you have to decide to make a difference to the world. Quote by Jenny Godwell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar. I'm Bhavani Singh Rajpurohit, and we welcome you to the Global Series Part 3. And for today's session, we are joined with the presence of Dr. Amar Patnaik. Sir, representing you on the Youth Parliament and sharing a screen with you is a truly honorable experience for me. Dr. Amar Patnaik is a member of parliament in Rajya Sabha from the state of Odisha, representing the Biju Janata Dal. He is also a party's national spokesperson and head of the party's IT wing. Before becoming an MP, Dr. Patnaik had a long and illustrious career in the Indian civil services and has served as the former Indian Audit and Account Service, former under the Controller and Audit General of India and the Principal Accountant General of Sikkim, Orissa, West Bengal, and the state of Kerala. Dr. Patnaik has also worked with the United Nations and World Bank for the global external audit assignments and has been the team leader for India's external audit mission to several countries. His academic qualification includes a bachelor degree in physics from St. Stephen College at Delhi University, an MBA in Finance and System from Xavier's Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, and Master Program in Public Management from Lee Kuan New School of Public Policy, Singapore, and Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. He was also a British canoeing Gurukul Scholars in 2013 to pursue studies at London School of Economics. Mr. Patnaik completed his PhD from Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. Mr. Patnaik has also worked extensively on issues of power asymmetry in rural India, law, technology, with emphasis on the privacy and data protection, corporate and government affairs. Last but not the least, his work also include an environmental and climate concern. For the world, he is Dr. Amar Patnaik, but we call him the lawmaker. And it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Amar Patnaik, the lawmaker, to our today's session on the legislative approach on the climate resilience and economic sustainability. We welcome you, sir. And now, I invite moderator Mr. Rumit Walia for today's session. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Bhavani. Thank you, Vaishnavi, everyone, Garima, who has been wonderfully introducing our speaker. Dr. Patnaik, I must say that it's an honor for all of us to have you here. And when I was reading about you, so not just yesterday and few days ago, even earlier, because I also worked a little bit with the EPIC Institute that you are engaged with. And Chevening scholars are one of my favorite, to be honest. So it's wonderful. And I'm sure that so we've got some questions ready, which I've received from all these amazing people, young people. So I'll try to stick to that. But pardon me if I ask too many questions. But I'm sure you would also love to answer them. So, as Bhavani has already set the context, it's about legislative approach to the climate resilience that is happening nowadays. I mean, we all see that our prime minister is roaming around the world advocating for environmental conservation, all these new initiatives from Har Ghar Saurya Urja, then Mission Life and Panchamrit. And not just our country, in fact, everybody is trying to lead in. And I was just reading about this stuff that Summit of the Future Pact has been adopted very recently, and people are just sharing here and there. But it's very important for people like us who are not from the law background to actually understand how all this work. So maybe the very first question that I'll ask you, which everybody wanted to, it's like what exactly is the significance of both the players, like the state from the legislative, executive, or judiciary purposes, and then non-state actors to democratize in the democratization of the environmental issues. I mean, how, we always see that okay, there is a law which is being prepared by a system, and now it is being put on, let's say, how people portray it on the shoulder of the general public. But accountability, when we talk about it, it's both sides. It cannot be on the one hand. So how can they work together to ensure the wider participation and accountability when it comes to environmental governance, let's say in our country?
Thank you so much, Romit, and Bhavani and Vaishnavi before you. Thank you so much, and I'm extremely delighted to be addressing this gathering of about 66 people who have joined so far, and I'm really very happy about the fact that people of your generation are recognizing that this is an issue which has to be resolved. This is an issue which can't leave us. In fact, this is my, it's a very favorite quote of mine, which I have spoken in the parliament and have written about it. And that is what you must have also read, that in the words of Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, there are three existential crises in the world, and one of them is climate change. The other one is inequality, and the third one is democracy. So climate change is something that is irreversible. You can only slow it down. In some areas, maybe you can probably reverse it, but very difficult. All that we are trying to do is to actually slow it down. Let the tipping point, as they say, not be reached. So each one, and what is most important to realize, since you made, you talked about the future summit and the summits before, what India is trying to convince the world and convey to the developed countries, the global north, who have already actually, in terms of climate justice, have made significant injustice to the world by polluting the environment, and are now propagating or preaching to the others not to do what they have already done. The problem there is that what India now says, that this is going to be one world, one humanity, and one future. So if there is a heat wave in India, people can't escape the same in global north. Why? Because the heat wave would be so probably intense that there will be large scale human migration from the global south to the global north, giving rise to issues relating to food security, water, vegetation, agriculture, land, pressure on the land, pressure on the infrastructure, pressure on the transport. So it's a complex issue. I would like to highlight here that, uh, this is what the sustainability school in the Kennedy School at Harvard is working on, and I was a part of that course, which is that human beings and environment are actually a strongly coupled system. It is not that because of human action, environmental degradation is happening, but because of the positive things that human beings are also doing, the environment is also responding. It's a coupled system. So if environment is also responding, in some ways, human beings are also changing. So one has to understand this didactic relationship, which affects each one affects the other. Having said all this, I will answer your question, which is how does it all happen? Now, the legislations, okay, as far as the global context is concerned, recognition that climate change is a serious issue. I think, first happened, it has been happening over a period of time. Rio de Janeiro and many of the conference of parties. And, for the first time, the Kyoto Protocol, and then the first time when binding agreement was signed between 196 countries is COP21 at Paris in 2015. But besides that, there is the UN FCC, which is the global body, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. This was made in 1994. There are several other organizations, for example, United Nations, framework for UNCCD, Conference for Preventing Desertification. Now, several such organizations are there. Now, this is global organizations, the national level organizations. Every country has recognized that this is the problem. As I said, in COP28, 199 countries, almost the whole world, has joined the bandwagon, realizing that this is something that there's only one future. Nobody is safe until everyone is safe. Just as we used to say during the pandemic, no one is safe until everyone is safe. Similarly here, no one would be safe unless climate change is addressed, whether it is global warming, whether it is migration, whether it is sinking of the Pacific Islands, whether it is cloudburst, whether it is melting of the Himalayan glacial systems, whether it is desertification. Many of you probably would know that the Mayan civilization completely collapsed because of climate change. The aquifer on which the entire civilization existed dried up, and it was a cycle. It was a cycle of rainfall coming down, the aquifer not getting recharged, human population pressure being there, and the entire civilization we only read in the history books. So it is possible that our human civilization would perish unless this particular issue is addressed. And thankfully, the countries have accepted it and are joining in. But the debate as to how much we should do and how much we should not do, what they say is nationally determined contributions. That debate has gone on for too long. And I think India has set the context right by saying that you can debate, but the problem is that you will have only one future. And therefore, I think India is leading the world as far as climate change, policies and climate change, action, climate finance, giving a voice to the global south, giving a voice, I think, also to giving a sensible voice to the entire globe that lifestyle changes are required, consumption has to decrease, reuse, triple R doesn't mean you wait for the last R, you reduce only your consumption, you reduce your waste, don't wait for recycle. So I think India is giving that message. So your question as to national level, global level, this is the context. At the national level, every country, some countries, the Scandinavian countries have done very well. They have strong national laws. For example, I think the UK, Norway. UK has a law for circular economy. Norway, France, New Zealand. Many of them have been the pioneers. They have laws to achieve net zero by 2050. In the Indian Parliament, also some of us have moved private member bills saying that we need a law to achieve this net zero. In India case, it will be 2070. But I strongly believe that laws are as good as their impact, as they are followed, as they are implemented. If there is no implementation, what is the use of that law? So I think practices, and someone spoke at the beginning about grassroots organizations reacting, being sensitive to this issue and reacting to this phenomenon and changing everything that is required to address this issue is the most important thing. Countries have reacted very strongly. Like most recently, South Africa, which used to have a high level of emission, has now passed a comprehensive climate change law. Now, India talks also about all these issues, but we also extract coal. We are still using fossil fuel. It is only going to change after 2030, 2040, because our developmental needs are also equally important. Poverty reduction is equally important. Multidimensional poverty reduction is equally important, but we are cognizant of that. So as long as you have a goal, and that goal is to be achieved by law, by policies, and most importantly, by participation of all the actors. You mentioned about non-state actors. Non-state actors are the most important, because it is not just that the state actors can pass legislations, coercive regulations, and the climate change issue will be over. Fortunately, climate change is one such issue. Decarbonization, reforestation is something which the private sector, the civil society, the individual, everybody has realized that all of them are responsible for it. And if you look at our constitution, the changes that came in 1976, you have the fundamental duties, and you also have the directive principles of state policy. The directive principles of state policy, section 48, it talks about, Article 48, it talks about states' responsibility to maintain environment, and Article 21 further says it's a part of right to life and therefore fundamental right. But fundamental duties of citizens also in 51A, it talks about that they also have a responsibility to maintain the water bodies, to maintain the air, to prevent air pollution. And then subsequently, the laws have been passed of water pollution, air pollution, EP Act, FC Act. I'm sure I'm not going to repeat. All of you probably know it all started first with there were these frameworks and guidelines, and then it'll be interesting to know the first of that series is actually the Wildlife Protection Act that came in 1972. So the recognition was there that wildlife is also very much a part of the ecosystem, which if the food cycle gets altered, then it will have impact on climate change. And then came if you look at the series, then the Forest Conservation Act in 80, the Air Act in 81, the Water Act in 74, it predates that. The Environment Protection Act in 1986, which is an all-encompassing act, and Biological Diversity Act in 2002. In fact, we underwent a change. I was a member of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, which went into the amendment into the Biodiversity Act of 2002. And of course, there's several hazardous waste management regulations. My good fortune has been that as an auditor general in several states, I have audited and found and reported through CAG's reports the violations that of these coercive laws by state authorities, by non-state authorities, by hotels, by restaurant owners. Those who belong to Kerala would know. I think I took out a report there which never got published, because I had said that half of the problems in Kerala's current problems of floods or whatever is happening is, of course, it is climate induced. Of course, it is something on which probably you never foresaw it. But it makes sense to make risk profiles and follow that. If you recognize that there is a risk, you will respond. If you do not recognize there is a risk, you will not respond. And that is what has happened probably there. And in other parts, it's not just Kerala, in other parts of the country as well. In Sikkim, I was there. Like, you must have read about that huge, that entire power plant got washed away because of the earthquake over there. And I had written at that time that the Himalayan lower reaches are very fragile compared to the northern regions. The Sikkim and Arunachal is very fragile part of the Himalayas. Now, if you construct too many of those power plants, big power hydropower plants, then it will impact the environment, and this is what is happening. So I think the laws are important. For example, you need to have Motor Vehicle Act, you need to have pollution check control on vehicles. But I think the most important thing is that, and that's I wrote a piece on environmental federalism. If you would look at it, I say that the laws are being framed at the center in India, but the implementation is being left to the states with no real money, no real budget for them. So unless and until the laws get framed and the implementation, if the implementation has to be made in the local level in every panchayat, I believe that every panchayat should have a local climate action plan. Because if a panchayat near, let us say, Paradeep in Odisha, which faced the super cyclone in '99, and entire village was washed away, 10,000 people. So they will have a different local action plan compared to something which is, let's say, in the same district but 20 kilometers away. So I think that is what we have to drive at, and that is what is not happening. That is what we have to do. I started something called as Parivesh Panchayats in Odisha. One is trying to, and this will happen only when people think that this is for real and this is going to happen. Unfortunately, people used to think that, not long ago, people used to think that this is going to happen after 100 years, this is going to happen after 200 years. We may not be there, but no, it is going to happen very soon. And the people who are going to suffer the maximum, which is the intergenerational equity issue, are you people actually. We will be spoiling, but you will be actually facing it. So you have to take the leadership, the championship in this, and make it happen. Make these implementation, which is probably stopping at the state level, go to the local level. I strongly believe that unless and until the local level, institutional mechanisms, both formal and informal. Informal is equally important. In Indian rural areas, informal is very important. That's my PhD, because if you tell something by way of a drama or a skit in a village, it makes sense to them, and then they would probably change their habits. For example, in agriculture, many of our agricultural practices are adversely impacting climate change. The use of fertilizers, chemical fertilizers. Now, a lot of it is happening from top down, but implementation has to be done bottom up. And that's where I think there's a missing gap, and that's where all of us have to contribute. The longest answer, but I thought I'll cover it.
No, that's wonderful. In fact, people were asking about the Odisha, this example that you mentioned very nicely, and everything. I think there are very few speakers right now like you are who are openly speaking about that. It's an irreversible change that we are dealing with. I mean, it cannot be reverted. We can only delay it. And then we actually see the problem with the first-hand experience, like, okay, what can we do to delay it, not to kind of revert it, because the whole mechanisms can go wrong in that way. But so my second question was supposed to be like, which you've already mentioned that, and whenever I ask this to any person, they always say the laws are one of the best in India. The environmental laws, how it started from the Stockholm Conference you mentioned. I mean, Biodiversity Act, Wildlife Act, adding more Ramsar sites. It's been happening very nicely every year. But people always say that the implementation is lacking in some places. And I think one of the solutions to that is what you already mentioned, that local panchayats, local municipalities, local formal and informal ways have to go in the right direction. So what would be the right way? For example, 60 of us are watching this, 65 of us. If we are living in different areas, if we are to approach the system or let's say influence the system around us. Some of us are in rural areas, we have access to the panchayat, but some of us are in the municipality areas. So what is that point, that direction that we should actually go about? Like, should we as simple as start with writing those filing the PILs, RILs, and then going to the offices and asking these demands? Or I mean, I'm kind of lost in that way. We know the solutions. We know that Ahmedabad came up with a wonderful heat action plan, but Delhi is not able to come up with one. So how do we reach out to these people in a way that it gets into the system, and then from bottoms up it became a top bottoms kind of a circular economy kind of an approach? So what would be your suggestion in that, sir?
See, I think CQ is the staying way forward. CQ at the village level, at the rural level. You need all these climate cadets. You are calling as cadets. I call them as climate champions, and collectives. Collectives will have to be formed, and these collectives will have to sensitize the gram panchayats, the non-state actors, and there are so many variables in this that you cannot actually have a solution which will actually factor in all the variables. So if someone decides, okay, we will take up the issue of waste management. So I'll come to waste management. When I'm talking about waste management, first thing I'm going to do is to reduce waste. Then I'll come to reuse of the waste and recycle of the waste and other things. But first is to reduce waste. Don't we know in our lives, because of our, as Prime Minister said, the life approach towards climate change, that we can actually reduce a lot of waste. And those wastes, some of them are biodegradable, some of them are non-biodegradable. And I always say this, I've written a piece on elections. I'm giving you this example. You can all look through this. You see the amount of non-biodegradable or even biodegradable waste that is created during the period of elections? Can't it be reduced completely? Hasn't our democracy matured enough to realize that we can appreciate governments without those huge posters and banners on Rexins, flexes and all that? So I think some of it has to get into the model code of conduct. Now, this is something where the election commission will have to have responsibility, but political parties will also have the responsibility. Now, when do political parties react or political leaders react? Only when they think that voters demanding. If there is a vote in it, then they will react to it. I'm being very frank. So I have also written a paper. Why is it that climate change issue, when everyone accepts as a serious thing, not featured in the not featured prominently in the election manifesto of parties? At least the national parties should take leadership in this. When you are saying that I am actually producing more wheat or more rice to be able to distribute it to people, one must also realize that for every grain that is being produced by using chemical fertilizers, pressure on the soil, pressure on the water table, and pressure on the carbon footprints are there. Is it possible that we could actually avoid it? Is it being used for the purpose for which it is being distributed, or it is being used elsewhere? Could it actually be done in a manner in which there is less pressure? So the political will, I still feel, the executive will, international covenants are there. The judicial will definitely much more, because they are realizing it, but they have also faltered. If I have written a piece also somewhere saying that if development and environmental, stewardship or environmental protection, they can go hand in hand, fine, but then it has to be skewed in favor of environmental protection. It cannot be skewed in favor of economic development. Now, this is a realization which the courts will have to do. This is yet to happen. But the weak link is the legislation part. We are legislating a whole lot of laws, but the point is we are still not doing it because everyone is doing it. It is isomorphic. Someone is doing it, so we are doing it. Mimetic. You are miming. but it is actually not in the heart. It has to be there, internalized. And that internalization will happen when every voter, which is there in a village, will demand that this is what we need. And this is where all of you could actually do. One is in waste management, one is in water management, one is in circular economy, one is also simply thing in changing your lifestyle, one is also if you imagine if Netherlands, the prime minister could actually cycle to the office, and if Indian prime minister does that, I'm sure 50% of India will do that. But it is our mental model which says that it is a status symbol or a symbol of authority if you travel in a car. So these are the things which can actually be championed by you people, because as I said, you have a right to be vocal about it. You are the generation which are going to face the inequity arising out of this in future because of the climate change. You will be the one who will be negotiating the adverse impact of climate change, and therefore you have a right to ask and hold the current generation to account, particularly generations which has been responsible in some way to degrade it and are now trying to take stewardship to be responsible, which is a good thing. They're probably thinking about the children, but I have a feeling that the youth of not just India but elsewhere, and particularly India, because India is the most young country, so they are the ones who are going to face the problem, and therefore it is you people who will have to take the cudgels and be at the forefront. It need not necessarily be a mass protest or a mass strike. What you're doing now is equally important, but you do this at the rural level. You do it through the grassroots organizations, like in Orissa we call them as Daskatia, Pala, folk songs, folk arts, folk songs. And then it appeals to people. It appeals to the people, and they will probably change those habits. And when you imagine a situation when a political party comes with a poster and pastes it on your wall, if a villager says that no, don't do it, you will not do it. And that's what it has to happen. Imagine the amount of money. When I have seen 2 elections, the amount of money that we spend on these things. So green elections is one, which is, I think, the way you can take leadership of environmental federalism, changes in the Disaster Management Act to recognize that this is an irreversible process, not just natural disaster, but these are disasters which are for real, which will remain forever, and therefore to put it over there. This is on this again I have written. And the last thing I have written is on carbon accounting. Now this is where again you people should take the lead. I'll be very happy if someone, I've written extensively on this in Hindu and other places, that just like you have the statistical, economic accounting of GDP, we need to have a carbon GDP. We need to have a carbon GDP for every household. Whoever produces less gets some kind of an incentive. If we do that, we'll be the global leader in this. People have been speaking about it, but in Oxford, I think somebody is doing a little bit of work. I know MIT, some professor Rajesh Kasturi Rangan, who used to be working with me on this. And I have talked to many professors across the world to know that someone is doing in small ways here and there. But I think if a state itself can also take up the lead, and just like Bhutan does gross national happiness, let's a state like Sikkim says, I will have GDP, GSDP, gross state domestic product, and also will have gross carbon domestic product. GSDP should be high, GCDP should be as low as possible. Then only you will be considered as sustainable. Unless you put a metric, numbers, people don't give seriousness to it.
That is amazing, sir. I think it sums up very well. Like, I mean, whatever you do, if there is no number to it, you cannot, I would put it out like, justify your environmental sustainability
Physics
effort.
student, no? I am a physics student. So.
Oh, yes.
And in economics, yeah, my PhD is in economics.
That's
So
a deadly combination. That's why we're getting all this information. But wonderfully, and an example came out when you were talking about how all the stakeholders, accountability, everything has to be in. So I remember that I don't know how many younger people remember, like there used to be 100-watt bulb everywhere. It's still there, and I mean we used to see it, but it took us around 10 to 15 years to switch from that 100-watt bulb to LED. But how many stakeholders, like everybody was involved, the government was involved, the private companies were involved, the individuals were asking for it. in between there was a safe hell, but it just went away like air. So I think all the stakeholders have to be like, there is a demand from all the side, and then it leads that way. So as sir also mentioned, we do not have to be on the ground protesting with those posters every time. What are the solutions that we can propose, and how we can actually get it into the system so that it reaches at least in our neighborhood? Even if we clean ourselves in our home, then our neighborhood, I think it gives a very good message. There is an example I remember in Delhi. Uh, she's a eye surgeon turned environmentalist. Her name is Dr. Ruby Makhija. Now, what she has done, she has made her society a zero waste society. And now she is leading that example to different other societies as well. So, I mean, these are the examples that definitely we can do. And then, so there's a question in the comment about this, the carbon accounting that you have been mentioning. And it's a very good question, because this is the same scenario, which is, I think people nowadays asking about carbon credits, green credits, because it's a system that has been recently announced. The how to, I mean, sustain the blockchain, how to make it more sustainable. So the person Akash Jha is asking, how far do you think we are from, I mean, realistically achieve the carbon accounting at corporate and personal level? Even right now, we have barely reached that far as to have unified or accepted national database for properly accounting according to GHG protocol. So what's your take on that? I mean, what should be that
Yes.
timeline that
So,
you have?
when I first talked about it and in the parliament, I've also praised for a private member bill and mentioned about it and wrote about it in Hindu. I realized that I'm the only one who is actually fronting this as a national carbon accounting authority, just like the National Statistical Organization. So, National Carbon Accounting Authority, and carbon accounting is done at every human action at the household level, and then gets aggregated to the national level. Now, we are nowhere near it. But I find that in bits and pieces, we're doing it. Let's say the ETS, which they have introduced in Surat and maybe in Punjab, that is the energy trading systems. Now, emissions are there. So, in an industrial cluster, and that's what I learned. This has been done through Epic Chicago in Surat. What they are doing is that every industry which is there in that cluster, the total emissions have been calculated, and then every year the total emission has to come down. So they fix that it will gradually decrease certain percentage, certain units. And how it is done? By a market mechanism, and the market mechanism is by selling what are called as the certificates, the green certificates, or that is a new organization or a new industry which sets up, spends money to become green, and therefore is positive compared to the total emission that is allowed. So they have carbon credit. So he sets that certificate to those who haven't done it, and those who haven't done it get some more time, and therefore they reduce it. You can read about it. Only danger here is that in market mechanism, there's a market failure when all these big industries who have a lot of money, financial wealth, and they don't spend it on actually reducing their carbon emissions, but they keep on buying these certificates just to be compliant. In that case, they become a hotspot. They become actually a carbon emission hotspot. So I have written again about this, and I went and told Mr. R.K. Singh, the minister, that they had taken out the ETS carbon credit conservation. In the Energy Conservation Act, there was an amendment, and they brought in this recognizing this, which is a good thing. But I said you have to also take care of this, that you can only buy 20% through your from outside, but 80% has to be your own will. Otherwise, if you have the financial muscle, then you only keep on buying the carbon credits. It's just like developed countries doing to developing countries. So this is another mechanism in which industrial clusters can get decarbonized. Company level, it is already happening. When I was in the Committee on Public Undertakings, I used to ask, what is the decarbonization plan? I think this is what the SEBI is now saying, ESG standards are to be there for 1,000 listed companies, the ESG declarations. So I think they should go annual action plan of companies and all that. Now that should be mandatorily having a decarbonization plan. Now, how will that happen? Again, the shareholders. If the shareholders demand, company will do. If the shareholders say, we are not bothered, we are only bothered about the profit, then company will not do. So a lot of it depends on us, and that will come because of our awareness. And how do I achieve it? I speak in the parliament. I write extensively. I speak in fora like this. But this is not going to help. This is only going to probably communicate certain things, make people aware, and embolden them about their responsibility. But ultimately, people have to deliver it at the ground level, grassroots level. Now, that's where I think everyone has to deliver, the private sector, hospitals. So I think we need to create champions, so whom people will follow. If Apollo does, this hospital is completely green, and there is nothing. And in fact, it's a let's say carbon, it generates credit first, but then they have to proliferate. They can't just remain one island of success amidst oceans of failure. That's what I said. That's what is happening in India. There are just excellent centers of excellence, 1, 2 villages, 1, 2 municipalities, but it's not really mainstreaming. And that is what has to happen. And that will happen, I think, once again. I still feel that people think that climate change, जिनको हिंदी में बोले प्रलय जो होगा वो कभी होगा देखा जाएगा, that kind of thing. But that's not too far. The tipping point can be very quickly coming up to us unless we reduce it to 1.5 degrees pre-industrial, and we are nowhere near it. So people will realize it. Let's say Bangladesh, I say this, Bangladesh on the coast, if a portion of it goes down, what you are seeing in Bangladesh of refugees coming because of the turmoil, nothing. Actually, the whole of Bangladesh will have to shift human migration of proportions which you have never thought of. So these are the things that I must admit that there's a lot of deficit and knowledge deficit on this score as to what would happen, what are the possible impacts through movies, through animations, in social media. How much people spoke in social media? Social media, and so someone is dancing and someone is jumping and someone is playing music, and you have reels made of this. How many is made out of this? This is required to be done, and this is what we can do easily. So I think there's a lot of knowledge deficit, and that is what we have to do. So what we are doing here is not an exercise actually on computer. It is actually trying to, I'm sure you'll be recording, you'll be sending it, people will see it. Some of them will get some inspiration from it. But this is the one which has to happen in village Chatsalis, as I say. Village schools, headmasters, they will have to, first they will know, only then they can say. And that has not yet happened. Internalization of the dangers of climate change has not really gone down to every human being at the rural level. It is still completely being decided, and policy-wise also, it is a transport sector mein ye change kar do, electric vehicle aa gaya. How many electric vehicles are being used in rural areas? 60% of India depends on agriculture, and agriculture is using chemical fertilizers. You are nowhere near organic fertilizers. I've spoken in parliament. I said, where is the plan? There is no plan. There is a chemical and fertilizers ministry whose job is to how to increase the use of chemical fertilizers. And there is an agriculture ministry whose job is to how to increase organic fertilizers. Now, both the things can't happen. These are the policy gaps.
I think this is something that we all, especially you all younger generation, have to deal with. And I think Sir has given us 3 very wonderful examples that I'll like to summarize is that I think we need to go back to our roots, because in rural areas, everything starts from there, and the technological advancement and still reaching on this point. So we can make it right that the right amount of information and the right technology reaches there, so that loopholes and gaps in our policy can be fulfilled, at least through our channel. We are so many younger generation talking about climate change. And the second point, how much do we actually talk on social media? I mean, on an average, sir, I was studying this research. In India, 5 hours is the average that younger generation spends scrolling reels and all the YouTube shorts. And we don't even give 5 minutes for environmental conservation on that. So maybe we need to look at that. And the third one that you previously mentioned, even not just in, let's say, national or state elections, I mean in university DO elections, how much the waste and then everything is being generated every day. I mean, just few days ago, a hell lot of paper and everything just to get one vote. Environment was nowhere in the manifesto and nobody was talking about it. In fact, the environmental science students. So I think these are the 2 3 things we all have to really look at. And I would like to now open the floor for questions. I think we have some hands. Reha Malik, you can go ahead and ask.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Patnaik, for that very insightful talk. I just had a question based on something you mentioned at the beginning of your talk about the complicated relationship between nature or like the environment and humans. I'm also from Odisha. I spent my initial years in Rourkela, and it's a town slowly turning into a city, as you know. And much like any other city, that city has a pattern wherein the elite of people who come from affluent socioeconomic backgrounds concentrate in one part of the city, whereas the poor who belong from relatively or people from marginalized backgrounds congregate in in another part of the city. And we have these groups in urban spaces where differences in socioeconomic background are very stark. And more often than not, people who belong to affluent backgrounds and people who seek to climb up the socioeconomic ladder often do so at the cost of the environment. So I'm thinking, and the urban space is created as one where it is seen as, where the environment or nature is seen as something that can be ignored or that can be dealt with through, say, better air conditioning or stronger structures or something that's more resilient, not to climate change, but just to the immediate effects of it environmentally. And I was just thinking, when you talk about activism and how we must cover a knowledge deficit, how is it that we begin to explain the very dangers of climate change to people who belong in these urban spaces and urge policymakers in urban spaces to respond to and react to issues related to climate change or build climate resilient infrastructure that is also green in nature, if people are, or if the urban space is designed to ignore climate change?
Yeah, so thank you, Rehan. Very good question. Many people have asked me the same question before. One thing which I forgot to mention during my interaction so far is the fact that the maximum impact of the adverse effects of climate change would be felt by the marginalized, the vulnerable, and the socialist poor people, socially disadvantaged, economically poor people. So this is something which has to be which has to be conveyed, and they have to be convinced that they are the ones who are going to face this problem. If forest fires are happening, they themselves are putting, let's say, forest on fire because they have to collect certain things. Then they are the ones who are going to face it. If modernization, as it means, and development as it means, is skyscrapers and buildings, as in said Raurkela, you do this, but that should not make them happy. That's what I'm saying, that it is ultimately the people who are the most disadvantaged who are going to feel the adverse effects. But unfortunately, they are voting, or they expect from their leaders a lifestyle or an infrastructure which is going to destroy them, actually. So this is because that content creation has not taken place in the right way. Let's face facts. Human civilization, we talked about the ice ages, the dinosaurs, and all that. We also read about it in books and in our classes. How many people really thought at that time that this is a danger in which the human civilization, we ourselves, will perish? That has only happened in the last maybe 50 years or 40 years, but the human civilization has stayed for so long. So this content creation has not really taken place. I see in Orissa, we had to rehabilitate or relocate a village completely in Kendrapada district because of coastal soil erosion. Now, this is when they actually see that their village is gone and therefore they have come. Now, then they start believing it. And therefore, they would not allow that such erosion to take place. How such erosion will not take place? Only if they take protective measures, they don't do overfishing, they don't do whatever trawlers, all these kind of things. The content has, however, remained very esoteric, even at your level or at my level or in parliament or at a level of a secretary. It really doesn't help. It is actually the people and the grassroots who are actually going to face the brunt of it. They will have to be the first responder. Now, in Orissa, if we have successfully been responding to cyclones, which are natural disasters, it's because we have brought the community buy-in. The community knows what it has to do, and therefore we are successful. It's not that people are suddenly they become successful. It took us 20 years since super cyclone in 99, in 2012-13, it has improved, and now people know that if a super cyclone is coming, we have to go to a multi-cyclone shelter. We have to do XYZ. We don't have to worry about it, and we'll come back to it. So we have been able to prevent loss of life. Now, this is the thing that has to be convinced that this natural disaster, a cyclone which came and went away after 48 hours, is not going to happen in case of if your entire mitti goes below the ocean. If the entire temple or let's say half of your house goes inside the water and you're not going to get it back, reclaim it back, no. So that realization has not happened. And for that, as you said very correctly, they think that they are trying to replicate the same thing which the urban rich is doing, and it's just like the developing countries think that economic. I'm totally against an economic development policy followed by any country which is purely. For me, economic development is not just development, and therefore I thought that I'll point this out very carefully. IPCC, all of you know IPCC. IPCC defines resilience as the ability of a social, first word is social, of a social, ecological, or socio-ecological system. If it would have been only ecological system, you would have seen that only environmentalists would have been talking about it. It's the best thing that IPCC has recognized, that it is going to affect society. And society and environment are intertwined. So socio-ecological system and its components to anticipate, to reduce, to accommodate, to recover from the effects of a hazardous event or trend in a timely and efficient manner. So this particular, I think many of our policies, economic policies, of course, I don't blame the economists, always get into numbers and GDP growth and all that. But the sociological implication of it arising out of, let's say, an environmental impact would be tremendous. It will destroy the social capital of a particular community, and for all you know, that community may not exist. If you are having rapacious mining activity in a particular area, it is not just a question of displacement. There would be economic growth, but it has actually completely destroyed a culture probably of a community, and that's much more dangerous. And this, if the culture is disheveled, as they say, Michael Charnia, World Bank says, there are 8 kinds of harmful effects of displacement. That there is a cultural dishevelment, in which case what would happen? Someone will become a thief, someone will probably become a terrorist, so societal fabric breaks down. These are the things which policymakers have to realize. Unfortunately, we are using only one lens, and that lens is the economic lens. Now we are trying to superimpose the environment lens into it. But mind you, all this would be forming only a small part of the social fabric that we live in. And if that fabric breaks, then no amount of economic growth will help you. So this is going to happen. Probably it will take a longer time. You see, we came with the Millennium Development Goals. Now we're talking about Sustainable Development Goals. So we are progressing. But I was very drastic when I say that I want National Carbon Accounting Authority. I want a number. I don't want only goals to be achieved. I want that, you say that if I have achieved 7% economic GDP growth in India has achieved 7 percentage growth in GDP over last year, we should also be able to say that there's been a 2% reduction in carbon emission compared to last year. Maybe this is an utopia. I don't know when it will ever happen or not. I think it will happen. It may not be in my lifetime or some of our lifetime, but I think that's the way forward. Unless you put a number, we will not be able to get it. And just as people are preparing balance sheets, financial balance sheets, you should also have carbon balance sheets. Instead of making only a declaration, ESG declaration, a disclosure that I have done this, I have done this, I have done this, I have done this without numbers.
Thank you so much.
I think with the social fabric point that you mentioned, I think it really puts out a new perspective of how people always kind of does not include it in the indigenous knowledge, the cultures, especially that is happening around the world, and how they have always felt a stronger bond between nature and humans.
Absolutely.
And then again, I mean, if climate is affecting your business, why are you not taking it into the consideration when you are giving back to the community, showcasing numbers or things like that? So I think these are some very wonderful takeaways. I'm sure somebody would love to write an article on this and share with you. Vaishnavi, we have your hand up. Would you like to go next?
Yes, certainly, sir. The first question is like the meeting timing is over. Would you be available for the next 10 or 5 minutes since we said that there's few questions?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Firstly, I'm Vaishnavi. I'm the founder of CQ. I'm the co-founder of CQ. With me, there is Vaishnavi Rai also available here. So, sir, at one point you were actually mentioning about these voluntary carbon markets, and you also talked about giving certificates. So, like being an economics student, so I'm working particularly in this area of climate financing, and I've always been wondering, like, how come this module in this voluntary carbon market system is going to be successful, since you very well brought out the loophole in front of us that the company which has a lot of money can just purchase a lot of carbon credits, and in a way or the other this is again becoming a spot where the carbon is not getting reduced but it's actually increasing their emissions. So you also talked about that you have worked on some papers, so particularly I would like to just have an insight as to what you have recommended as a solution, and I would also request you that all these sessions will be followed by some researchers that all the climate cadets will be doing, as the organization is based on 3 basic pillars of research, climate diplomacy, and as you mentioned, creating cadets. Yes, it's about community engagement. So all 3 of them are here. So I'll be grateful if you can share your papers with us or over the mail or anywhere, so that I can also use and circulate them with the people who are available in the meeting afterwards. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, in fact, I have written on most of this in most of the leading newspapers. So, for example, I've written on the need for changes in the Disaster Management Act, the National Carbon Accounting. I've written in a couple of pieces, 3 pieces. I have written on green elections, a couple of pieces. I've written on climate smart agriculture. I've written on environmental federalism. So these are available. So if you just do, I think, climate, and Amar Patnaik should be able to get it, Google, and get it. But in case, I'll try to tell my associate to make a list of articles and send it across, or circulate it to one of you who can circulate in different groups. But this is very close to my heart. And I forgot to mention again one more very interesting on the social thing, that in Harvard, they'll teach you a case study. There's one case study which really touched my heart. And that is when the hurricane, forgetting
Katrina in Louisiana.
When it came and it ravished the eastern part of New York, or let's say US. So there are 2 communities. How was the response different? In one community, there were too many rich people. In another community, there were black, poor people. The response was much better because the social capital was stronger. The bonding was stronger. Less people lost their lives compared to the cities. Now we are artificially when the climate change happens, it is not just always the physical response. It is also the societal infrastructure response. It is also the societal response, community response. And that community response is important. Suppose, let's say, a mother is able to deliver a baby and a cyclone is coming. In Orissa, we have kept in multi-cyclone shelters separate space. And we have seen that when many people are delivering during those 2 days, but the community takes care of it. The doctors are not available to go and do it there. So this complexity, this has to be understood. And if this is understood, only then the policy will be all right. I am not disputing the current trajectory of policy in which we are trying to first reduce the carbon emissions. The big factors were, let's say, the transport sector or the mining sector or the construction sector. That's all fine. But I think that the best way this is going to happen is only when every individual becomes responsible. I give you an example. When you collect dust from your house, even in rural areas, you'd collect it and throw it out. Why do you throw it out? That out is also your space. That out is also your space. So that right from the beginning, that particular internalization has not taken place. Now only we are saying, okay, put it in the green box and put it in the red box. But otherwise, क्या होता था? वो करके बाहर में फेंक दिया, रोड पे फेंक दिया, as if the road is somebody else's. So और जाके forest में फेंक दिया, as if the forest is somebody else's. So that ownership of the environment, ownership of the system, वो नहीं आ रहा था, अभी आ रहा है, and that is where I think we can all of you can really contribute in your own way. In each family, if such change takes place, it will happen everywhere. As I said, laws are there. Forget about environmental laws. There are other laws which are just being flouted as well, and you will go to the National Green Tribunal and try to debate it. That will happen. But I think at a societal level, if change is what you want, and there is a credible response, as I said at the beginning, human environment is a coupled system. If you behave well, the environment will behave well, and if the environment is behaving well, in return, again the human being. It's a relationship which is didactic. It is not that you only keep on behaving well, otherwise the environment will wreak havoc on you. If you are doing something, the environment might do double of that. So, regeneration of water bodies. You might be expecting only little bit of water to come. Suddenly you find that nature has given you back much more. Now, this kind of case studies are also not available. As I said, the content is not available in social media, which is the prime, as I say, 5 hours every day someone is spending. How much of content on environment is being created? It is only few environment NGOs. It is only a few of those who are working in the environment sector. Or it is only those who are trying to sell a product saying that it will combat climate change and say something that it can achieve. Numbers are not available. When per capita, we say per capita income has increased from 5 to 10, we know that it has happened. But we should also be say that per capita emission has decreased from 5 to 2.5. Unless we are able to say that, I am a strong believer of that. We have to get numbers into it.
And I think, sir, it's a wonderful example how a lot more emphasis you've been putting on numbers, because it really brings that, the ownership that we have.
Nobody wants the numbers. That is why nobody wants the numbers. Even the developed world doesn't want numbers. Developing countries want probably, but the developed world doesn't want. The rich companies don't want. You only want disclosures. You want only CSR 2%.
But I think that's a tough job that we all have to do.
Yes.
And with that, I know there are so many questions all of you have, but maybe we'll have Sir some other time as well. And we'll be sharing the resource material with all of you. So you'll already have so many answers to it. Feel free to connect with Sir in so many places he has been visiting. So with that, I would like to now invite David, who is an executive board member at C3C Cube. And he's a student at Columbia University, to give the vote of thanks. Over to you, David. David, you're muted.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. I mean, first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful session. So, I'm a graduate student at Columbia University. So, I'm studying climate science, and the insights like you have given, I mean, right now are like, I mean, tremendous. Actually, like those are so useful. I'm. I woke up for your session like so early, like because I was like so interested to listen from your own words. So like it's a wonderful session, like I really enjoyed a lot. And I recently attended this summit of future at UN General Assembly, where there also like we have discussed about these policy gaps and also impacts from rural level, and even the informal ways of giving awareness. So yeah, I mean like so currently like I was thinking, I mean like in from this meeting, so it looks like I'm in the UN General Assembly and listening the same stuff. I mean like it's so wonderful, sir, like I can't even tell you. So yes, I mean thank you so much for accepting our invitation and like for this wonderful session. So yeah, so hi everyone, as we conclude our session today, I would like to take a moment to express our sincere gratitude to Amar Patnaik sir for his invaluable contribution in our global series part 3. Sir, your lecture on legislative approach and on the policy gaps and resilience and economic sustainability was not only insightful but also deeply inspiring. Like we are, I was telling to my one of the co-founder to Vaishnavi also. So maybe like it's time we should consider uh, renaming our organization to Climate Champions Collective, like instead of cadets, like as you said. So we definitely work, I mean, to bring awareness like uh, among the youth, and we expect the way like you address all the questions from our audience and fostering a rich dialogue that enhance our understanding furthermore, and your expertise and real world examples from India and also, I mean, through the global area, uh, are like uh, I mean, so helpful. Thank you so much once again, sir, like for sharing your time and knowledge with us. We look forward to continue having more discussions and collaborations in the future with you. And we definitely share your all your works to our volunteers or whoever join the meeting to, I mean, to expand their knowledge beyond this meeting. So yes, sir. I mean, thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Like, so happy to see you, and thank you so much for accepting a invitation
Thank
for
you,
this.
David. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Diplomacia Assembly, I would say, not the General Assembly of the UN
Yeah, yeah.
or the CQ Assembly or something.
Oh,
You guys, right? Honestly speaking, you guys inspire me. I see hope that this would actually go forward. This will be taken to its logical conclusion, because if that is not done, uh, let me just conclude by saying, if you remember, I said that Stiglitz says that there are three: climate change, three existential crises. Existential means civilization will not exist. And one is climate change, the other one is inequity. So, climate change exacerbates inequity. The poor will become poorer and the rich will become richer. Why? Because the rich guy will be able to afford, let's say there's a heat wave, the rich guy is able to afford an air conditioner and is going to stay and survive, and many poor people will die. And if he wants to buy an air conditioner, he'll have to take loans, so becomes poorer, debt ridden, and then even becomes poorer. So the gap increases. Now, therefore, I see a lot of hope that all of you are taking in this issue, uh, and I see that you come from different backgrounds, varied backgrounds, but you people agree to this fact that as far as various backgrounds are concerned, various discipline professions, future is one as far as climate change is concerned, and therefore it should affect, or it should interest all of us, and we have to take the leadership in this. You have to take the leadership because you are the generation who are going to face the impact of climate change the worst in a few years. And therefore, you have to take the leadership. And I therefore say climate championship. I would recommend, lastly, I'll end by saying there is something called institutional entrepreneurship. If you do Google, you'll find my book is on that. My PhD has been converted into a book by Paul Graham Macmillan. So this is about institutional change. Now you put questions, no? How do I get change? How do I get this change? You read that. You may not read that book. It's quite dense. It's a PhD book, but you can read a certain portion of it. There is something called institutional entrepreneurship in organizational behavior, organizational management, organizational theory. I have borrowed that to bring it for social change. So this is what you can say, do that, and we can develop a concept. It is not yet talked about so far. Climate entrepreneurship, and let's work on this. Is whoever is interested in this, we can have the same material, and there you need a convener. This convener is the champion who will do the convening and convening of different stakeholders. What will be the attributes of that convener is written in that book. So we can develop a whole literature based on this, which is still not there in the world today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.